The hall was filled with the warm buzz of conversation, clinking dishes, and soft music playing from a small speaker in the corner. It was the kind of gathering where families met, children ran around, and laughter flowed easily. In the middle of all this noise, he sat quietly near the back table, watching people enjoy themselves. He wasn't the type to interrupt or draw attention. Most people barely noticed him, and he seemed perfectly fine with that dot. Across the room stood a woman with a bright spirit and a bold sense of humor. She loved making people laugh, especially during gatherings like this. She spoke loudly, waved her hands when she talked, and always had a confident smile. She was surrounded by friends who were teasing her about her high standards when it came to choosing a partner. Every joke made her laugh harder. Someone from her group pointed at the old piano sitting by the wall. It looked like a leftover piece from another time, its wood faded and keys slightly uneven. No one ever touched it. It was more like decoration than a real instrument. One of her friends joked that she should find someone who could play music for her every day. She laughed and replied, "If someone here can play something beautiful on that old piano, I will marry him." She said it with a dramatic pose, making everyone around her burst into laughter. It was the kind of comment people made only for fun, and she expected nothing more than a few jokes in return. But her friend nudged her and pointed toward the quiet young man sitting at the back table. "What about him? Ask him to play." She turned and looked at him. He was sitting there with his hands folded on the table, calmly listening to the noise around him. He didn't look like the kind of person who would respond to bold challenges. In fact, he looked like someone who preferred not to be noticed at all. She laughed again and said loudly, "Hey, you! If you can play something amazing, I will marry you." The whole group laughed even harder. The room fell just a little quieter as people around them picked up on the playful challenge. Some turned to look at the quiet man, curious to see what would happen. He lifted his head slowly, surprised that the attention had suddenly turned toward him. He wasn't offended. Instead, he had a soft, warm smile on his face, the kind that made people feel he wasn't bothered by jokes. He didn't respond right away. He simply looked at the piano, then back at her. She expected him to shy away or wave it off. Most people would. After all, who wanted to embarrass themselves in front of so many people? But instead of looking nervous, he seemed thoughtful, almost like the idea meant something to him. Her friends whispered among themselves, "Do you think he'll try it?" "No way. He looks too quiet. Maybe he doesn't even know how to play." The whispers continued as the woman raised an eyebrow. Waiting for his reaction. To everyone's surprise, he stood up slowly. A few chairs shifted as people looked his way. He took a deep breath and started walking toward the piano. The woman's playful smile faded into confusion. She hadn't expected him to take it seriously. It was just a joke, something said to make people laugh. He reached the old piano and brushed the dust off the top. The keys felt rough under his fingertips, and a gentle sigh left his lips. It had been so long since he touched an instrument. A long time since he let himself feel the connection he once had with music. Memories flickered in his mind, not in sharp images, but in the soft warmth of something once loved. The people around him became quiet, wondering if he really planned to play. A few children ran closer, trying to get a better look. Some adults whispered, unsure whether this was going to be funny or impressive. The hall felt different now, filled with a mixture of curiosity and anticipation. The woman who made the challenge suddenly felt her heart beat faster. She didn't know why. Maybe it was the way he walked, calm and steady, or the way he touched the piano as if it mattered to him. The moment didn't feel like a joke anymore. She called out lightly, "Hey, you don't have to really do it. I was just teasing." Her voice didn't carry the same boldness as before. It was softer now, unsure, But he simply turned his head, smiled gently, and nodded as if to say it was fine. Then he sat down in front of the piano. His posture straightened a little, and his hands hovered above the keys. He didn't rush. He took his time, letting the air settle around him. People leaned closer without meaning to. The chatter faded. Even the small speaker playing soft music was turned down by someone who realized something unusual was happening. The woman stood frozen in place, not knowing whether to laugh, apologize, or walk away. But she couldn't move. It was as if she sensed that something important was about to happen, even though she didn't know what. He closed his eyes for a moment, taking in a deep breath. Not to show off, not to impress, but almost as if reconnecting with a part of himself he had hidden for a long time. His fingers rested gently on the keys. The hall waited not know. One knew that the man sitting in front of the piano carried a history that none of them imagined. They only saw the quiet figure who rarely spoke, who seemed ordinary in every way. But beneath that simplicity was a story of music, talent, and a childhood filled with melodies that once brought crowds to their feet. And now, with nothing more than a light challenge and an old piano in front of him, he felt something inside him wake up. He opened his eyes slowly, and the room fell completely silent as his fingers prepared to move. The moment he placed his fingers gently on the keys, a strange stillness filled the room. It wasn't heavy or tense, but more like the quiet before something meaningful begins. People who had been laughing a minute earlier now stood with curious eyes fixed on him. He didn't rush. He simply breathed in slowly, as if letting the memories of music return to him one by one. He had avoided the piano for years, but the feeling never fully left him. The keys under his fingertips were familiar, even though everything else around him had changed. As he sat there, he remembered a distant time when music was the center of his life. A time when every day began with practice and ended with applause. He had been young then, far younger than most performers on stage, and people used to call him a natural talent. But life had changed too quickly. One event after another had taken him away from that world. He had chosen silence over performance, chosen a simple life instead of one filled with travel, pressure, and bright lights. Music had once been his joy, but later it felt like a weight he could no longer carry. So he let it go, hoping peace would follow. But now, sitting at this old piano in a crowded hall, something inside him stirred. He didn't understand why a simple challenge from a playful stranger had touched him this deeply. Maybe he missed the feeling. Maybe he missed the part of himself he had hidden for so long. Or maybe it was the way she looked at him, first joking, then nervous, now unsure. Something about that made him want to show a little of who he really was. He didn't plan to impress anyone. That wasn't his intention. He only wanted to play, even if it was just for a moment. His fingers finally moved. A soft, gentle sound came from the piano, almost like a whisper. It wasn't loud, but it carried a warmth that made the room grow even quieter. People leaned closer without meaning to. Even children paused, sensing the shift in the air. The woman who had challenged him stood frozen, her eyes locked on the young man at the piano. She didn't understand what she was hearing yet, but she felt something rising in her chest. Her heart started beating faster, not because of embarrassment now, but because the sound felt unexpectedly beautiful. No one expected him to play like this. Most people thought he would tap a few keys, make everyone laugh, and walk away shyly. But the melody growing from under his fingertips was slow, emotional, and full of something deeper, something that felt like a story without words. Every note carried a piece of him. The hall, once filled with noise, became a space where people only felt the music. Even the old piano, worn and slightly out of tune, responded to his touch like it had been waiting for someone to bring it back to life. A few people exchanged silent glances. Who was he? How did he play like this? He looked so ordinary, so quiet, so easy to overlook. Yet here he was, guiding the melody with the confidence of someone who knew exactly what he was doing. The woman covered her mouth without realizing it. She had meant to tease him, nothing more. But now she could only stand there, unable to look away. The bold smile she had worn earlier was gone, replaced with something softer, more meaningful. As he played, his mind drifted far from the room. He remembered the small apartment where he grew up, the piano his family saved for years to buy, the morning sunlight hitting the keys while he practiced. He remembered competitions, late-night rehearsals, and the joy he once felt when people listened with genuine admiration. Then came the difficult memories, the exhaustion, the pressure, the moment he realized music had stopped being his happiness. He pushed all of that aside now. This moment wasn't about the past. It wasn't about audiences or expectations. It was simply a chance to reconnect with something that had shaped him. The melody slowly shifted into something richer, something that seemed to rise from deep inside his heart. It wasn't a famous piece. It wasn't something people could name or compare. It was his own creation, one he had never played for anyone before. It carried the softness of his quiet nature, the weight of his memories, and the sincerity he rarely showed. People in the crowd felt it. They didn't need to understand music to know that this performance was special. Even those who didn't care much for piano music stood still, unable to look away. The woman who had made the challenge took a small step forward, then stopped herself. Her throat tightened a little, as if emotion had caught her by surprise. She had teased him for fun, but now she wished she had chosen her words more carefully. He wasn't someone to joke about like that. He wasn't someone ordinary. He was someone with a hidden world inside him, a world she had never expected. He didn't look at her while playing. He didn't look at anyone. His eyes were focused on the keys, but his expression was calm, peaceful. It was the face of someone who had found a familiar place again. As the music continued, some people pulled out their phones to record. Others simply watched with quiet admiration. The hall felt like a place where time moved slower, where everything else faded except the melody. He didn't think about the challenge or her words. He didn't think about what people expected. He only played until the music inside him gently reached its end. His fingers slowed, and the final note hovered in the air, like the ending of a long, heartfelt story. The room stayed silent for a moment, as if no one wanted to break the spell. Then the applause began. Soft at first, then louder, until the hall echoed with it. People clapped not because they felt obligated, but because they had witnessed something real, something unexpectedly beautiful. The woman felt tears touch her eyes before she could stop them. She quickly wiped them away, hoping no one saw. But a few people did. They smiled, understanding that she wasn't crying out of sadness. She was overwhelmed. He finally looked up, surprised by the applause. His calm smile returned, but there was a gentleness in his eyes, as if he had poured out a part of himself and now felt exposed. The woman stepped forward slowly. Her voice, usually playful and bold, came out soft. I didn't know you could play like that." He nodded lightly, as if it wasn't important. "It's been a long time," he said quietly. She didn't know what else to say. Her heart felt full, tangled with admiration and a little bit of guilt for underestimating him. Her friends nudged her, whispering things she didn't pay attention to. She couldn't focus on anything except him. He stood up from the piano, wiping dust off his hands, and gave her a small smile that made her feel strangely nervous. He wasn't proud. He wasn't showing off. He was simply honest, humble, and incredibly skilled. She took a breath. "Who are you really?" she whispered, unable to hold back the question. He didn't answer right away. He looked at the piano, then at the crowd still watching, and finally back at her. "Just someone who used to love music," he said softly. But as she looked into his eyes, she knew there was so much more to that story. She could feel it. And she also knew that this moment, this unexpected discovery, was only the beginning of something deeper. She had challenged him as a joke. But now, she realized she had opened a door to a past she never imagined, and a connection she never expected to feel. The applause slowly faded, but the feeling left behind stayed in the room like a warm echo. People continued to look at him with amazement, whispering among themselves as if they were still trying to understand what they had just witnessed. For a long moment, the hall did not return to its usual liveliness. It felt as if everyone was holding on to the last notes of his music, afraid to let them slip away too quickly. He stood beside the piano, unsure of what to do now. He wasn't used to being the center of attention anymore. His world had been quiet for years, and being watched by so many eyes made him feel both exposed and strangely relieved. It was as if he had finally allowed the part of himself he'd buried to breathe again. The woman who had challenged him stood a few steps away, her breath caught in her throat. She had never expected this outcome, and her mind struggled to catch up with what her heart already felt. Her playful challenge had turned into something much deeper, something she couldn't laugh off anymore. She took a small step toward him, but her friends reached her first, whispering excitedly, "Did you know he could play like that? Where did he learn? He doesn't look like someone with that kind of talent." She barely heard them. Her eyes stayed fixed on him, trying to read the calm expression on his face. When their eyes finally met, she felt a small spark of guilt for teasing him earlier. She had treated him like someone ordinary, someone who could be joked about. But now she understood how wrong she'd been. He gave her a gentle smile, not a proud or confident one, but a humble smile that made her feel even more emotional. It was the smile of someone who didn't expect praise or attention, someone who simply loved the moment of playing. She took a quiet breath and walked toward him. When she reached him, she hesitated. The boldness she usually carried seemed to fade in his presence. Her voice came out softer than she expected. "I didn't mean to push you into performing," she said. "I was just joking around." "I didn't know?" He shook his head lightly, still wearing that gentle smile. "It's fine," he replied. "I wanted to play." His voice had a calm, steady tone that made her feel even more curious about him. He didn't sound defensive or upset. Instead, he sounded grateful, as if her challenge had opened something inside him. A few people approached and thanked him for the performance. Some told him they were moved by the music, while others simply said they had never heard anything so beautiful. He nodded politely to each one, though he looked slightly overwhelmed. The woman watched him carefully. She noticed how he handled the attention with quiet grace, nothing like someone used to applause or admiration. He stood like a person who had once lived a different life and now carried it silently. When the crowd slowly drifted back to conversations and food, the hall began returning to its normal rhythm. The music from the small speaker was turned on again, though it suddenly felt too simple after what they had heard. The woman walked beside him as he stepped away from the piano and returned to his seat. She sat across from him, her heart still fluttering from the moment. "I still can't believe it," she said softly. "How long has it been since you played like that?" He looked at his hands for a moment. "Years," he answered. "A very long time. Why did you stop?" she asked. He took a slow breath, thinking before he spoke. "Life changed," he said. "A lot of things happened. Music became something painful for a while." She nodded slowly, sensing that he didn't want to share too much yet. She didn't push him. Instead, she looked at him with new respect. He picked up a glass of water and took a small sip, trying to steady himself. The performance had left him feeling lighter, but also exposed. He wondered if he had made a mistake by playing. He had worked so hard to separate himself from his past. But when he played, it felt natural, like speaking in a language he hadn't used in years, yet never forgot. When he looked up, he found her staring at him with a thoughtful expression. She quickly glanced away, embarrassed at being caught. "Sorry," she said. "It's just, I can't believe I didn't know. You seemed so quiet." He smiled again. "Quiet doesn't mean empty," he said. That line stayed in her mind. It felt like a simple sentence, but it carried weight. They sat together for a while, both unsure of what to say next. But unlike before, the silence between them wasn't awkward. It felt natural, even comfortable. After a few minutes, some people in the hall gathered near the long table of food, laughing and mingling again. The normal energy of the gathering returned, but something had shifted. Everyone now looked at him with curiosity and admiration. A few older guests approached him. One of them asked, "Where did you learn to play like that?" He hesitated. Then he said quietly, "When I was younger, I used to perform. It was a big part of my life." The older guest raised an eyebrow. "Ah, that explains the skill." The man nodded, but didn't continue the story. He didn't want the attention. He didn't want to reopen the past fully. He preferred the quiet, the simplicity. But the woman sitting beside him was even more curious now. She wanted to ask everything: how he started, what happened, why he left music, but she held back. Instead, she decided to ask something simpler. "Did you enjoy playing today?" she asked. He paused for a moment, then looked at the piano across the hall. A soft warmth touched his expression. "Yes," he said quietly. "I did." That answer made her smile. For some reason, she felt relieved to hear it as the evening continued. Others began approaching him again, but this time they weren't asking questions. They simply wanted to thank him or express how moved they felt. Some told him they hadn't heard live piano in years. Others said the performance made them emotional. He didn't know how to handle so much attention at once. The applause was one thing, but people sharing their feelings made him feel vulnerable. She noticed this and stepped in a bit closer, almost as if protecting him from being overwhelmed. She didn't push people away, but she stayed nearby, helping him feel comfortable. At one point, one of her friends whispered to her, "Looks like you found someone special." She blushed and shook her head quickly. "I didn't mean it like that. I didn't even know he could play." Her friend laughed. "Well, now you know." She tried to hide her reaction, but inside she couldn't deny the truth. Something about him pulled her in, not because he played well, but because of the quiet strength he carried. After a while, the hall grew louder again with music and chatter. But even with all the noise, the memory of his performance seemed to stay in the air. People didn't forget easily. Sometimes they still glanced at him, almost as if hoping he would play again. He didn't go back to the piano, though. Once was enough for the night. The woman finally gathered the courage to ask something she had been holding back. "That melody you played, was it from somewhere? A song? Or something you made yourself?" He turned to her, surprised that she noticed the difference. "It was mine," he said. "Something I created a long time ago." She felt a tingle in her chest. It was beautiful. He lowered his eyes for a moment. "Thank you." She wanted to say more, but the words caught in her throat. She wasn't used to feeling this way, soft, nervous, unsure. She had always been bold, confident, outspoken. But now she found herself choosing each word with care. As the gathering slowly approached its end, people started leaving one by one. The hall grew quieter again, but this time the quiet felt peaceful. He stood up, preparing to leave. She stood up too, not wanting the moment to end. "Will you play again someday?" she asked. He looked at the piano, then at her. "Maybe," he said. She smiled. "I hope so." He walked toward the exit, moving slowly, as if he wanted to take one last look at the hall where he had surprised everyone, including himself. She watched him leave, feeling a mix of admiration and something deeper she couldn't yet name. She had started the night laughing, joking, teasing, but she ended it with her heart quietly drawn toward someone she never expected. And as he stepped out into the evening air, he realized something too. The music he thought he had lost might not be gone after all. And the person who brought it back into his life might be more important than he realized. When he stepped outside the hall that evening, the cool air brushed against his skin, clearing the last bit of tension he carried from the performance. He took a slow breath and looked up at the night sky. It felt calm, steady, and open, like the world wasn't judging him anymore. For a moment, he stood still, wondering how one unexpected challenge had awakened a part of him he thought was gone forever. Inside the hall, the woman who had challenged him watched him disappear through the doorway. She stayed near the empty piano, her thoughts tangled between admiration and curiosity. She hadn't expected to care this much. She hadn't expected her playful words to create such a powerful moment. She sat on a chair near the piano, touching the edge of the instrument gently. Her fingers rested on the wood, and she wondered what it felt like for him to play again after so many silent years. She tried to imagine his younger self, dedicated, talented, full of dreams, before life forced him into silence. Her friends walked by, waving goodbye as they left one by one. They teased her lightly, saying things like, "You really picked the right person to challenge, and looks like you're the lucky one tonight." She tried to smile, but her mind wasn't in the mood for jokes anymore. Something about his music had touched her deeper than she expected. When the hall finally emptied, she stepped outside too, wrapping her arms around herself as the night breeze brushed by. The streetlights glowed softly, and she walked slowly, not ready to go home just yet. Her thoughts replayed the melody he had played, every note still clear in her memory. She wondered if he was still nearby, or if he had already vanished into the night. Meanwhile, he walked down the quiet street, not in a hurry, letting the night settle his thoughts. He wasn't sure how to explain what he felt. Playing had awakened memories, some good, some painful, but none of them felt heavy now. Instead, they felt like parts of a story he had stopped reading too early. Maybe it was time to turn another page. A few minutes later, he heard footsteps behind him. He turned and saw her approaching slowly, her steps soft and unsure. She stopped when she reached him and offered a small smile. "I wasn't sure if you had left already." He shook his head gently. "Just walking." For a moment, neither of them spoke. They simply stood there on the quiet sidewalk, two people connected by something unexpected. She looked at him more closely, noticing the calmness in his eyes. "I feel like I should say thank you again," she said, "for playing, for sharing that part of yourself." He looked down slightly, almost shy. "You don't have to thank me," he said. "I think I needed it too." Her heart warmed at his honesty. "You know," she said softly, "when I made that challenge, it was just a joke. I wasn't trying to embarrass you or anything. I didn't know." He finished her sentence in his own quiet way. "That I used to live through music?" She nodded. He took a slow breath. "It was a long time ago. I stopped because things became too difficult. I felt like the music wasn't mine anymore." She tilted her head, listening. "And today?" He paused before answering. "Today, it felt like it belonged to me again." A soft smile formed on her lips. "I'm glad." They started walking together without deciding to. Their steps matched naturally as they moved down the street. The night felt peaceful, not heavy, and she felt strangely comfortable next to him. After a moment, she asked gently, "Do you ever miss it?" He looked up at the sky for a second before answering. "Sometimes," he said, "but missing it was easier than playing again." "Why?" She asked, hesitated. Because when you love something too much, it hurts when life takes it away. She nodded slowly, understanding more than he expected. She didn't push for details. She didn't need to know everything at once. They reached a small park where the soft streetlights gave everything a warm glow. They sat on a bench, and for a while, they simply listened to the quiet around them. She finally broke the silence. Your music. It made everyone feel something tonight. But it also made me feel something I can't explain. He glanced at her, curious. What did it make you feel? She took a breath, choosing her words. It made me see you differently. Not as the quiet guy in the room. Not as someone to tease. But as someone who has lived, someone who carries deeper stories. He looked down again, not used to being seen that way. I didn't mean to overwhelm anyone. You didn't, she said quickly. You showed something real. People don't forget moments like that. They sat for a moment longer, letting the night settle around them. She looked at him and asked softly, when you were playing, what were you thinking about? He closed his eyes briefly, remembering the feeling. I was thinking about peace. About finding a place inside myself that I thought I lost. She listened closely, her heart warming at his honesty. He continued, though his voice softened. And I was thinking about how freeing it felt. Like I could finally breathe. She didn't interrupt him. She didn't try to fill the silence. Instead, she let him speak at his own pace. After a moment, she said, I hope you don't stop again. He turned to face her. I don't know what the future holds. But today reminded me that the music is still there. She smiled gently. I'm glad I was there to hear it. Their eyes met, and for a moment, the world around them quieted even more. She felt something warm rise in her chest, something she hadn't felt in a long time. They talked for a while, longer about simple things. About life, about how strange it was that one joke had turned into such a meaningful moment. As time passed, the air grew cooler, but neither of them seemed bothered. When it was finally time to head home, they walked back toward the main road together. Before they parted ways, she looked at him with a soft but bright expression. Can I ask you one thing? He nodded. If someone asked you to play again, would you? He thought for a moment, then gave her a small, sincere smile. If the moment feels right. Yes. She felt her heart flutter lightly. Good, she said softly. Maybe one day? I'd like to hear you play just for me. Her words hung in the air, warm and gentle. He didn't blush or look away. Instead, he held her gaze and nodded once. Maybe one day you will. They stood there for a moment longer, neither wanting to end the night. But eventually, they exchanged a quiet goodbye and walked in opposite directions. As she headed home, she found herself smiling without meaning to. She felt something new growing inside her, a mix of curiosity, admiration, and a delicate hope she didn't want to lose. As for him, he walked with a lighter step than usual. He didn't know what would come next, but he knew one thing for sure. The music in his heart had begun to wake up again, and the person who sparked it now mattered more to him than he expected. The room was still humming with the last notes he had played, almost as if the piano itself was not ready to let go of the moment. People around him were still clapping, but their applause came in gentle waves, not loud or wild, but full of respect. It felt like everyone wanted to hold on to the magic just a little longer. The young man stood up slowly from the piano bench, his hands dropping to his sides as if the music had drained something from him, but in a calming way, not a tiring one. He looked around the room, a bit shy again, as though he had not just stunned a whole hall of people with a performance that none of them had expected. The woman who had thrown the challenge at him stood frozen for a moment, her eyes still wide. She had gone from laughing with her friends to standing quiet, her heart beating fast after what she had just witnessed. The playful spark in her eyes had softened into something deeper, something she didn't know how to hide. Her friends nudged her gently, some smiling, some whispering about how she had accidentally challenged a hidden master. She finally took a small step forward. He looked at her, waiting, with a calm expression that made her even more nervous. She opened her mouth, but no words came out at first. Her thoughts were scattered. She had only meant to tease him earlier, to make her friends laugh. She had never imagined that he would accept the challenge, let alone reveal such a remarkable talent. The crowd continued murmuring, some replaying the performance in their minds, others talking excitedly about how they had witnessed something rare. A few guests even said this was the most beautiful music they had heard in their lives. Someone nearby was whispering that his fingers moved like he had been born on the piano bench. Others were guessing why he had never mentioned that he could play. Finally, she managed to speak. Her voice was soft, almost shaking, but she forced herself to look him in the eyes. I didn't know," she said slowly. "I didn't think you could play like that. I shouldn't have said it the way I did earlier." She let out a small breath, embarrassed and amazed at the same time. "I didn't mean to make fun of you." He smiled gently, the same quiet smile that had surprised everyone earlier. He shook his head lightly. "It's okay," he said in a calm tone. "You didn't know." His voice was simple, steady, and it made her feel even more aware of how she had underestimated him. She pressed her lips together, not sure if she should apologize again or say something different. Then he glanced around the room, then back at her, and said with a playful spark, "But you did say you'd marry me if I played." The whole hall burst into laughter, not mocking, but joyful. She covered her face with her hands out of pure embarrassment, her cheeks burning. Even her friends doubled over, laughing and nudging her. She shook her head, laughing through her hands, then lowered them slowly to look at him again. I didn't think you'd take it seriously," she said, her voice still shaky, but now mixed with laughter. "I didn't," he said with a tiny shrug. "I just played." The way he said it made her smile even more. She realized he had not taken her challenge as a joke or an insult. He had simply accepted it with an open heart, and when he played, he was not playing to show off or prove her wrong. He had played because music still lived inside him. Even after so many years of silence, someone called out from the back, "Well, now you two look perfect together." More laughter filled the room. She covered her face again, but this time she was smiling widely. The young man laughed softly too, but he didn't tease her any further. He was gentle, and she could see that dot after the crowd calmed down. Some people approached him, asking questions about his past. He didn't reveal everything, but he did share small pieces how he used to play when he was younger, how life became busy and heavy, and how he had put music away for a long time. Yet, while he spoke, it was clear that playing again had awakened something meaningful in him. The woman who had challenged him stood quietly beside him now, listening to every word. She felt strange inside, part guilt, part admiration, part something she couldn't name. She noticed how humble he was, how he didn't boast about his talent, and how he almost seemed surprised that people were so amazed at as the event reached its final moments. People began saying their goodbyes. A few guests told him he should start playing again, maybe even perform somewhere. Others said they hoped to hear him play again soon. He nodded politely, not committing to anything, but the idea seemed to linger in his mind. The woman waited until most people had left. She knew she owed him a better apology, something real and honest, not rushed or embarrassed. When the room was finally quiet again, she approached him slowly. He looked at her, waiting patiently. "Listen," she said softly. "I know I joked earlier, and I said things without thinking. But what you played today, ... It wasn't ordinary. It was something else. It was beautiful. He looked down for a moment, a little shy again. Thank you, he said simply. She continued, I didn't know you had gone through so much. And I never expected you to carry something so deep inside you. She sighed lightly. I'm sorry for underestimating you. He shook his head again, his calm nature showing through. You didn't do anything wrong. And if you hadn't said anything, maybe I wouldn't have played at all. Her eyes softened. She realized he was right. If she had not joked the way she did, the entire hall would never have seen what he could do. Maybe he would have continued hiding his talent forever. In a strange way, her teasing had opened a door for him. Still, she said gently, I feel like I owe you something. He raised an eyebrow slightly. Like what? She smiled nervously. Well, she paused, thinking about how ridiculous her challenge had been earlier. Not marriage, she joked softly, and he laughed quietly. But maybe something real. He waited silently, curious. Maybe you could play again sometime, she said. Not because of a joke or a dare. Just because you want to. And maybe I could be there to listen. Her voice trembled slightly at the end, but it wasn't from embarrassment now. It was something warmer, Dot. He looked at her for a long moment. His eyes softened in a gentle way that made her heart skip. I'd like that, he said. She felt a wave of relief and happiness wash over her. It wasn't a promise of anything too big, and it didn't need to be. It was a small beginning, real, simple, and honest. They walked out together, talking in soft voices as the night breeze brushed past them. She asked him about the music he used to love, the songs he wished he had played, the memories that came rushing back when he touched the piano again. He told her little pieces at a time, careful but open. As they reached the exit, she glanced at him with a gentle smile. You know, she said, people will be talking about what you did tonight for a long time. He shrugged lightly. Maybe, he said, but I'm just glad I played again. I didn't know I needed it. She nodded. She understood more than he realized. From that night on, something changed between them, not rushed, not forced, but natural. They began talking more. They found reasons to meet. She encouraged him to play again, showing him that his talent was not something to hide, but something to share. And he, without even trying, inspired her too. She learned not to judge people too quickly, not to assume, not to joke in ways that might hurt. She learned that quiet people often carried stories deeper than anyone imagined. What started as a challenge meant to tease turned into the beginning of a bond neither of them expected. And while the world would forget the jokes she made, she would never forget the way his music made her feel, or the way that moment changed them both. It was not a love story born from a promise, nor from a dare, but from a simple truth. When someone finally lets the music inside them be heard, it can change more than just a room. It can change two lives forever.